It began with compliments, seemingly harmless remarks that felt utterly out of place, like a blizzard in July. Emma wasn't one for showering praise, especially not on me. "Been hitting the gym?" she'd inquired one evening as I entered from the garage, still in my suit. It wasn't even a particularly nice suit, just my standard attire for meetings where image trumped substance. "That shirt looks great on you," she'd commented another time, sliding a coffee mug across the counter with a smile that seemed forced. I hadn't even purchased it myself. The thing is, I pride myself on observation, not paranoia. I'm meticulous, attentive to nuances. The subtle shift in someone's voice, the micro pauses in their speech, the sudden daily application of perfume after 8 years of indifference. Emma wasn't a bad person. She had her eccentricities, like everyone else. Her aversion to toothpaste caps, her obsession with true crime podcasts. But she wasn't typically affectionate. So, why the abrupt personality shift? My intuition, always reliable, warned me. Perhaps it was innocent, a genuine attempt to reignite something we'd both neglected. But my gut had never misled me, and it wasn't starting now. The real clincher came one evening as I passed her in the living room. Perched on the couch, phone in hand, her thumb scrolled furiously. Usually, she'd be engrossed in reruns of Grey's Anatomy or some captivating crime documentary, but this felt different. "Who's that?" I asked casually, peering over her shoulder. She angled the screen away, a swift, practiced movement that bordered on rehearsed. "Just work," she mumbled, her voice strained. "Work?" Emma's job rarely extended beyond spreadsheets and emails. No one messaged her at 9:30 p.m. on a Friday. I didn't push it. Confrontation wasn't my style. People believe they're cunning, untouchable. They become careless when they assume you're oblivious. I intended to let her believe she was getting away with it, at least for the time being. Pouring myself a drink, I settled into my armchair. My eyes were on the TV, but my mind raced. I'd seen enough films: The Unfaithful Wife, The Clueless Husband. It was always so straightforward in fiction. But this wasn't a movie. This was my life, and I wasn't oblivious. I was watching. If Emma thought she could play games, she had underestimated her opponent. If my suspicions were a low hum before, they were now a deafening siren. Emma's sudden phone attachment wasn't a phase, it was a pattern. She'd never cared about its location. It languished on counters, vanished in her purse. Now, it was permanently affixed to her hand. So, I decided to investigate. Not literally, of course. I wasn't a hacker or some tech whiz. I didn't need to be. Technology is a double-edged sword. It provides just enough rope for self-sabotage. First, I observed her departures, her arrivals, her stated destinations. Patterns emerge when you pay attention. Then, I remembered an old iPad gathering dust in my office drawer. We'd set it up years ago, both logged into her iCloud. She'd likely forgotten it existed. I hadn't. The instant her phone synced, it was like unlocking a treasure chest. Messages, call logs, photos. It all spilled onto the screen. Finding what I sought didn't take long. His name was Darren. The texts began innocently, like testing the waters, work-related, polite. They quickly devolved into something else, something sickeningly intimate. "Miss me yet?" Darren had written, followed by a winking emoji. "Always," Emma replied. I scrolled further, inside jokes, silly nicknames. She called him Tiger, he called her Sunshine. It was like observing two teenagers role-playing love, except one was my wife, and the other a middle-aged cliché who probably wore cologne from a gift set. One message, however, resonated. "He's so boring and predictable," Emma had typed. "It's like living with a piece of furniture." I leaned back, staring at the screen. Furniture. Boring. Predictable. I should have been enraged, furious, but I wasn't. I smiled. "Well," I murmured, "let's play unpredictable." Gathering evidence wasn't about knowledge alone, it was about leverage. I needed undeniable proof. Messages were one thing, but I wanted to see them together. The next day, I contacted a private investigator, Mike, recommended by a lawyer friend. Mike had that gruff, world-weary demeanor that inspired confidence. "She's cheating, huh?" he asked after I'd explained. "Yeah, got a name, Darren. Works in real estate, mid-level manager type. Probably drives a car he can't afford." Mike chuckled. "I'll handle it." It was swift. 3 days later, Mike delivered a folder brimming with photos and a flash drive. "She's meeting him at a motel outside of town," he said, shaking his head. "Same place, same time, every Thursday." The photos were damning. Emma and Darren strolling hand in hand into a seedy motel, kissing in the parking lot, grinning like the world was theirs. I studied them for a long time that night. I didn't feel rage or heartbreak. I felt clarity. If Emma thought I was predictable, I would demonstrate just how wrong she was. Revenge isn't an impulse. It's a craft. A skilled craftsman takes his time, works meticulously, ensures every piece fits perfectly. I wanted to dismantle her life, brick by brick. The first step was maintaining appearances. Emma couldn't suspect a thing. I greeted her as usual, even offered a compliment or two. She barely registered them, her focus elsewhere. I worked behind the scenes. The bank was my first target. We shared a joint account, but I discreetly opened one in my name, transferring funds, small sums, spaced out, until most of our savings were under my control. Each transaction was coded as a household expense: groceries, repairs, gas, the mundane details no one scrutinizes unless they're looking. Next, I revisited the evidence, the texts, the photos, the videos. They painted a vivid picture of Emma's infidelity. I compiled everything into a neat digital file, complete with timestamps and captions. The pièce de résistance, however, was Darren. Mike, my investigator, had exceeded expectations. He delved into Darren's life, social media, work history, even court records. Darren was precisely as I'd imagined, overconfident and underqualified. A mid-level manager at a small real estate firm, married with 2 children. His Instagram was a parade of leased cars, overpriced watches, and cringe-worthy motivational quotes. My plan began taking shape, one detail at a time. I spent the next few days contacting key figures in Darren's life, starting with his wife, Lisa. I found her on Facebook, her profile a curated collection of family photos and captions about cherishing moments. It required finesse, but I captured her attention. A carefully worded message accompanied by a few photos of Darren and Emma at the motel. I offered to meet, to explain everything. To her credit, Lisa agreed. We met at a downtown coffee shop. She looked shell-shocked, eyes red-rimmed, hands trembling as she sifted through the evidence. "I knew something was off," she murmured, more to herself than me. "He's been distant, short with the kids. I thought it was work stress." "It's more than that," I said gently. Lisa nodded, her jaw clenching. "What do you want from me?" "Just cooperation," I replied. "You'll understand why soon." Back home, I maintained the facade of the unsuspecting husband. Emma continued her charade, giggling at her phone, vanishing for business dinners. She hadn't noticed the shifting tides, but she would. Their next rendezvous was Friday night. I knew this because Emma and her phone had become a predictable performance I could recite verbatim. The furtive smiles, the long day at work excuse. It all screamed guilt. My groundwork was laid. It was time to spring the trap. Lisa had proven a quick study. Upon seeing the messages and photos, she hadn't crumbled. She'd sharpened like a woman on a mission. "Let's hit him where it hurts," she'd said, her voice steady but laced with venom. We'd formed an alliance. That afternoon, I entered the kitchen where Emma was engrossed in her phone. She barely glanced up as I announced, "Just got a call from work. They need me out of town tonight. Last-minute trip. Probably won't be back until Sunday." Her reaction was as predictable as sunrise, a flicker of disappointment, swiftly replaced by relief. "Oh," she said, feigning concern. "That's too bad. Travel safe." "Of course," I smiled. She leaned in for a kiss, and I obliged. It was a peculiar sensation, kissing someone while acutely aware of their betrayal, but I maintained my composure. I had more pressing matters. I moved quickly. My first stop was her car. Crouching by the rear tire, I unscrewed the valve cap. A small tool, purchased for this specific purpose, allowed me to release just enough air to flatten it. It wouldn't take long for her to notice, but it would delay her just enough. I retreated to my car, parked out of sight. Lisa, meanwhile, had informed Darren of a fictitious book club meeting. He was, predictably, pleased by his wife's absence. From my vantage point, I observed Emma emerge, dressed impeccably. She paused at the car, frowning at the flat tire. She muttered something, retrieved her phone, and began typing furiously. I imagined her messaging Darren, apologizing for the delay. Moments later, she hailed a cab. Perfect. As she passed, I smiled. "The game is afoot," I whispered. I started my engine and followed, making a phone call as I drove. Darren, meanwhile, was en route to the motel, anticipating a romantic evening with Emma. He envisioned her waiting, flashing that coy smile she reserved for him. What he didn't anticipate was Lisa, seated in the faded lobby, arms crossed, the folder of evidence balanced on her lap. Darren froze, his expression morphing from smug anticipation to wide-eyed panic. "Lisa," he croaked, his voice cracking. She rose, slowly, deliberately, closing the distance between them. She wasn't angry. She was far more dangerous. She was composed, calculating. "Darren," she said, her voice quiet but sharp. "Imagine my surprise when a complete stranger contacted me with these." She raised the folder. "I don't know what you think you saw, but—" "Oh, spare me," Lisa interrupted, her tone unwavering. "For months I've noticed. The late nights, the disappearing acts, the excuses about work dinners that didn't add up. I gave you the benefit of the doubt. God help me, I wanted to believe you." She shoved the folder at him. "But I'm done being the idiot in this marriage." "Lisa, please," Darren stammered, his hands trembling as he clutched the folder. "This isn't what it looks like." "Don't insult me, Darren," she snapped. "This is exactly what it looks like. And thanks to James, yes, the husband, I have everything I need." His mouth opened and closed, speechless. He resembled a fish out of water. Lisa stepped back, her expression hardening. "I've already filed for divorce. The papers will be delivered Monday. Oh, and don't bother coming home. I've changed the locks. The kids know you're not coming back." Darren's eyes widened in horror. "The kids, Lisa, don't—" She cut him off with a raised hand. "Don't you dare say their names. You don't get to drag them into your mess. Go ahead, enjoy your evening here, Darren. You'll need a place to stay." Lisa didn't wait for a reply. She turned and walked out, the click of her shoes echoing through the lobby. Just before exiting, she glanced back. "Oh, and Darren." He looked up, ashen-faced. "Do yourself a favor and cancel that Cologne of the Month subscription. You reek of desperation." And she was gone. He rushed to catch up with her, his face priceless, Lisa reported later, her voice tinged with satisfaction. Like he couldn't decide whether to cry or run. I chuckled. He's probably still in shock. It's not every day someone gets a front-row seat to their own downfall. Emma's night was about to take a similar turn. Arriving at the motel, she expected Darren. Instead, the clerk handed her an envelope. "Someone left this for you," he said. Inside was a single sheet of paper. "What do you think happens next?" Emma stared at the note, her face paling. She questioned the clerk, who shrugged. "Some courier dropped it off earlier," he said. Panicked, she tried calling Darren, but it went straight to voicemail. She had no idea her night of betrayal was just beginning. Returning home, Emma discovered the changed locks, her belongings boxed on the porch, and a note taped to the door. Well, is it unpredictable enough? A final flourish of poetic justice. She began calling me relentlessly. I didn't answer, observing her frantic pacing on my phone's intercom camera. I let it ring and ring and ring. I let her stew for nearly an hour, her phone glued to her ear, alternating between me and Darren, whose evening had taken its own disastrous turn. Finally, on her 20th attempt, I answered. "What's going on, James?" she demanded, her voice a mix of anger and desperation. "Why can't I get into the house? Why are my things out here?" "Trash day," I replied calmly. "I even hired a special team, professional garbage removal. They packed your things. You'll also find a folder with all the evidence of your betrayal. And don't worry, I've filed for divorce. My lawyer will be in touch." Silence. Then a shaky breath. "James," she said, her voice cracking, I can explain." I laughed, a low, quiet sound that probably chilled her more than any shouting could. "You're a little late for explanations, Emma. I suggest you find a place to stay. You won't be coming in. And I'll be gone for a few days. Business trip, remember?" "Wait, what?" "Goodbye, Emma." I disconnected, but the real fireworks were yet to come. Lisa and I had decided to go nuclear. Divorce wasn't enough. We ensured their affair became public knowledge, in their social circles, at their workplaces. That was waiting for them in the morning. "Is she losing it yet?" Lisa asked, lounging on the hotel bed. We'd booked a nice room for the weekend. "Oh, she's spiraling," I replied, setting down my phone. "And Darren checked into the motel alone." Lisa raised her glass. "Cheers to poetic justice." I couldn't help but smile. Emma had called me boring and predictable. Tonight, she was learning just how unpredictable I could be. We were taking our revenge on Darren and Emma all those weekends in that hotel, but that's a whole other story.